My name is Arya, and before I met Caleb, I thought love was something that happened to other people. Something soft and far away, like rain you hear through the window but never step into. That changed on a Tuesday. It was late September, and I was sitting alone at a quiet bookstore cafe tucked between a record shop and a florist on the edge of downtown Asheville. I always came there when I needed to breathe, when the world got too loud or my own mind started folding in on itself. I was reading The Bell Jar for the fourth time. Some books hurt in all the right places. I didn't notice him at first. He just sort of appeared, tall, a little unshaven, with eyes that looked like they held back more than they let out. He walked up and said, "You don't strike me as the Sylvia Plath type." I looked up, half amused, half annoyed. "And you don't strike me as the brave type," I said. "And yet, here you are." That was the start of us. We talked for hours that day. Caleb had this way of listening, really listening, like what I said actually mattered. I hadn't felt that in a long time. Most people want to fix you or label you. He just sat with me. In the silence, in the stories. And he made me laugh. God, he made me laugh like I hadn't in years. He told me he'd just moved to Asheville to start over. That he hated his job, that he didn't really know what he was looking for, only that he was done pretending. I told him I painted because it was the only way I knew how to make sense of everything I carried. That I didn't believe in small talk. That I was terrified of becoming invisible. I don't know how to explain it, but by the time the sun dipped behind the mountains, I felt like I'd known him in another life. Like some part of me had been waiting for him to walk into that bookstore and challenge my solitude. And from that moment on, we were inseparable. We fell hard. Fast. And I don't regret a second of it. He'd pick me up after my gallery shifts, and we'd drive nowhere with music too loud and hands too tight. He learned the sound of my silence, the shape of my sadness, the way I needed space but also desperately wanted to be held. He made me feel real. When I told him I'd grown up in foster homes, that I sometimes woke up with memories I didn't want, that the moth tattoo on my back meant I couldn't help but chase light, even if it burned, he didn't flinch. He kissed my shoulder and whispered, "Then I'll be the kind of light that doesn't hurt." I moved in with him after 2 months. The apartment was small but full of windows. My paints lived on every surface. He never complained. He'd watch me at 2 a.m., while I stood barefoot in our kitchen, smearing color across a canvas like I was trying to outrun time. He made me feel like art, even when I was falling apart. I remember one night on the rooftop. We were wrapped in a blanket, lying under stars that looked too close. I turned to him and said, "Promise me you won't forget this version of me." He frowned a little, confused, then smiled and kissed my forehead. "I'll never forget any version of you." But part of me already knew. I knew there were things I hadn't told him yet. Things I hadn't told anyone. Shadows that had started creeping in again, darker this time, heavier. I knew that something was coming. I just didn't know how to stop it. So I asked him to remember me, not because I wanted to be poetic, but because I was scared. Scared of what I was becoming. Scared of what it would do to us. But that night, I let myself believe. I let myself love him fully, recklessly, endlessly. Because sometimes, you don't get a second chance at that kind of love. And deep down, I think I already felt time slipping through my fingers. At first, it was small enough to ignore. That's the thing about fading, it doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It slips into your days like dust, settling quietly until one morning you realize you can't breathe the same way anymore. I started waking up tired. Not the normal kind, not the I stayed up too late painting exhaustion. This was heavier. Like my body had been awake all night without me. My hands would shake when I held my coffee. Colors didn't feel as sharp. Sometimes I'd stare at a blank canvas for hours, unable to remember why painting had ever mattered. Caleb noticed before I did. You okay? He asked one morning, watching me push food around my plate. I'm fine, I said automatically. I was always fine. Women like me learned that word early. But he kept looking at me, that quiet concern settling behind his eyes. You've been distant. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to say that some days it felt like I was watching my life through glass. That my reflection didn't always feel like mine. That there were moments when my own name sounded unfamiliar in my head. Instead, I smiled. Just tired. The truth was scarier. There were days when I couldn't remember conversations we'd had the night before. Little gaps. Missing time. I'd find unfinished paintings I didn't remember starting. Once I caught myself standing in the shower, water ice cold, unsure how long I'd been there. And then there were the moments when I disappeared emotionally, when Caleb would talk, and his voice sounded far away, like it was coming from another room. He tried to pull me back. He held my face in his hands, asked me to look at him. Arya, where are you right now? I wanted to say I'm here. But the words stuck. Something was wrong with me. I knew it. I could feel it in my bones. The worst part wasn't the fear. It was the guilt. Because Caleb loved me so openly, so fully. He deserved the version of me that laughed easily, that painted until dawn, that pulled him onto rooftops and kissed him like time didn't exist. And I could feel that version slipping away, like sand through my fingers. I started pulling back without meaning to. Canceling plans. Sitting alone longer. Locking the bathroom door when I cried so he wouldn't hear me falling apart. I didn't want him to watch me unravel. One night, I woke up gasping for air, heart pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. Caleb sat up instantly, pulling me against him. What happened? He whispered. I couldn't answer. I was shaking too badly. I think I'm disappearing, I said finally, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. He laughed softly, brushing my hair back. Hey. No. You're right here. But I wasn't sure. Days blurred together. I missed a gallery opening I'd been preparing for all year because I couldn't bring myself to leave the apartment. I stopped painting entirely. The colors felt wrong. Like they didn't belong to me anymore. And then came the appointment. I hadn't told Caleb I'd scheduled it. Some instinct told me to go alone. The doctor's office smelled like antiseptic and old carpet. I sat on the paper-covered chair, legs bouncing, staring at a poster about brain chemistry and mood disorders. When the doctor spoke, her mouth kept moving, but the words came slowly. Too slowly. Tests. Irregularities. Memory gaps. Dissociation. More scans needed. Not answers, just confirmation that something wasn't right. I walked home in a fog. When I opened the apartment door, Caleb was there, smiling like everything was still normal. Hey, he said. I was thinking we could. I broke down. I slid to the floor, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. He rushed to me, holding me, asking what happened, what he could do. I don't know what's happening to me, I cried. I'm scared I'm going to lose myself. I'm scared I'm going to lose you. He held me tighter. Then we'll face it together. But that night, lying awake beside him, I realized something terrible. Whatever was happening to me, it wasn't just hurting me anymore. It was starting to pull him under too. And the scariest thought of all settled into my chest like a stone. What if loving me was the thing that destroyed him? I noticed it gradually. At first, it was barely noticeable. His smile didn't touch his eyes. Then there were long silences between lines. His hugs would get a little longer, as if he was afraid I would disappear if he let go. Caleb was changing. My world was blurring from the inside, and his was erasing from the outside. As if I were a disease, quietly transmitted through touch, through love, through us. He was starting to forget himself. I saw it in the way he sat in the dark room, not moving. In his vacant gaze. In the way he stopped drawing in his notebook, those silly little sketches he always left for me on the kitchen table. Before there had been hearts, teapots, funny crooked cats. Now it was empty. He was going into the shadows. I saw him trying to be strong. How he forced himself to cook me food, even when I didn't eat it. How he refused to go to work because something would happen. How he reads articles on the internet until 4 in the morning, about trauma, about amnesia, about dissociative disorders, about what could be happening to me. I knew he was looking for a lifeline. I knew he wasn't giving up. But his eyes grew emptier with each passing day. And the worst part was, there was nothing I could do to help. I tried, really tried to hold myself together. To wake up. To talk. To pretend I was still the same person I was on the roof with him that night. But every attempt I made only emphasized how far I had already gone. And the more I disappeared, the more he lost himself. One night I found him in our bathroom. Sitting on the floor, holding my old paint that had long since dried. Just sitting there, staring at the wall. "Caleb," I whispered. He didn't answer. His shoulders were shaking. I sat down next to him. He didn't look at me. "I don't know how to save you," he said finally. "And I don't know who I'll become without you." Those words hurt more than any medical diagnosis. Because I knew he was right. I was stealing him from inside. His joy. His strength. His faith. He didn't cry. Caleb rarely cried. But at that moment his hands were cold and his voice was broken. I hugged him with all my strength. And I said something I hadn't dared to say in a long time. "I'm afraid you'll burn with me." He looked me straight in the eye for the first time in a long time. "Then let me become the fire. I'd rather burn than leave you alone in this darkness." We sat on the cold tile for a long time. Without words. Just breathing each other's breath. And I realized, even the shadow of love is stronger than the light of indifference. But I also knew that if he didn't find the truth, if we kept drowning in guesswork and pain, I would lose him sooner than I would lose myself. And that's when something changed. He no longer asked me how I felt. He started asking why. Something had changed in him after that night. He was no longer just a shadow wandering around. He no longer asked how I was feeling, because he knew I no longer knew the answer. Instead, he took action. Quietly, stubbornly, silently, like people who have lost something too precious to retreat. I didn't realize right away that he was looking for something, someone. That he was digging deeper than I had ever dared. I thought my condition was just something inside me. Like a breakdown that had happened deep inside. But Caleb didn't believe in just because. He went through every old medical record he could find of me. He even contacted my former childhood caregiver, Mrs. Hayward, who I hadn't heard from in over a decade. Her voice was shaky as she said, "I always knew something had been done to you, Arya." But I wasn't allowed to dig any deeper. My hands shook as he handed me the phone. I heard her, but I didn't believe her. "They gave you medication at the house, remember? They said it was for anxiety. But there was something else going on." And then the pieces started to come together. All those gaps in memory, strange flashbacks, gray areas in childhood memories, these weren't just symptoms. They could be consequences. Caleb started looking for documents. He went to a lawyer. He found a record of a research project that included the name of my old orphanage. I, like several other girls, could be used in a clinical experiment, illegal, closed, almost completely silenced. I didn't know how to react. My brain was fighting back. How could you believe that your memories weren't your memories? And Caleb, he didn't stop. He met with people who worked in those structures. He recorded conversations. He collected data. And finally I found a name, Dr. Lawrence Kent, a neuroscientist who had been working on experimental methods of influencing long-term memory. It was he, the lawyer said, who might have been involved in interfering with the minds of the girls who grew up in the house where I spent my years. Caleb found him. Not right away. But he did. I didn't know he had gone to meet Kent. It wasn't until he came home late that night, with his collar torn, his hands scratched, and his eyes no longer the same as the men I had once met in the coffee shop, that I realized something had happened. He broke you, Caleb said. But now it's on me. What did you do? I whispered. He knelt down next to me. I didn't hit him. But I made him talk. And I have a recording. A confession. He pulled out his recorder. I didn't listen. I couldn't. Not yet. We'll give it to the press, to the police. That's it. You're not crazy, Ari. You're broken. But we'll put you back together. I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. But something in my chest that had been empty for months filled with something resembling hope for the first time in months. I saw him like I'd never seen him before. Strong. Dangerous. Desperate. But completely mine. He wasn't the quiet guy from the coffee shop anymore. Not the one who only loved. He was a man who could fight for what he loved. And that's when I realized, we're not drowning anymore. We are going ashore through the storm but together. I watched him disappear. Not in the way I had disappeared, smoothly, quietly, barely audible. His disappearance was loud. Resolute. He was turning into someone I didn't recognize, and that scared me and drew me to him at the same time. He became obsessed. After that meeting with Dr. Kent, he hadn't slept again. His hands were constantly shaking not from fear but from adrenaline. His laptop was cluttered with documents, correspondence, audio recordings, dates. He had turned our home into a center of investigation. He wasn't just fighting for me anymore. He was fighting against a world that dared to break me. His face had become different, sharper. He began to wear dark clothes, shave less often, smile less often. But his eyes burned. There was a light there, not the soft one he had shown on me in the beginning, but sharp, neon, almost dangerous. A light that doesn't just illuminate, it burns. If I become different, he said one evening, will you stay? If you become different, I replied, it's because the world has made you stronger. And I will stay, because I love every version of you. But it's hard to tell the truth, sometimes I miss that guy who brought me coffee with cinnamon and drew funny cats. I saw how much it cost him. He stopped talking to his friends. He lost his job. His family wrote to him that he was too deep into your problems. But he didn't even blink. I'm not who I was anymore, he said. But maybe I've become who I was supposed to be. His struggle bore fruit. Thanks to his efforts, the publicity, the documents, the testimony of other girls who also grew up in that orphanage, an official investigation was opened. The press wrote about us. Our story was discussed on social media. People believed. And for the first time in many years, I felt real relief. But with each victory, Caleb went deeper into himself. As if he couldn't stop. As if he didn't see life outside of the struggle. Sometimes he would sit on our balcony, look at the night city and whisper, I did everything right, but why do I feel like I've lost myself? I would rest my head on his shoulder. We were silent. Because we both knew, the truth rarely gives a sense of peace. Sometimes it's like the wind that blows off the roof but leaves you alive. Caleb became different. Stronger. Wiser. More dangerous. Less naive. He no longer sought the light, he became it himself. Tough, demanding, blinding. And it was this man who brought me back to life. Not the one who bought me flowers. But the one who went to hell to pull me out of it. Time did not turn me back. It didn't bring the colors back to my paintings. Did not fill in the gaps in memory. And he did not return the peace that once lived between our hands. But he gave me something else. Space. A space to see everything as it has become, imperfect, uneven, deeply broken, and beautiful in its own way. After everything, after the truth that came out, after the processes, articles, revelations, life did not become easier. I still have days when I can't find myself in the mirror. Days when I lose words in the middle of a conversation. When the body seems foreign. But I am no longer alone in this. Caleb stayed. Not because I asked. And because his love was deeper than fear. It ceased to be about me, and became a part of him. Regardless of what happened to me. We were sitting on the roof of the same building, where our nights under the stars had once begun. It was cold. November. The city below was burning with small lights, cars, windows, people hurrying somewhere. I held his hand. For the first time in a long time, without shaking. Are you sorry? I asked. What is left? He looked ahead, was silent for a few seconds. Then he slowly turned to me. No. I'm sorry I didn't meet you earlier. To all this. To have a chance to just live with you. No struggle. Without pain. But we didn't have that chance, I said quietly. No, he nodded. But we had this one. And he is right. Because there is something in what we went through that cannot be explained in words. This is not a postcard romance. This is something else. Deeper. It's dirtier. More true. Love is not always easy. Love is when you stay, even when it hurts. And pain is not an enemy. He follows. Evidence that something was real. I no longer believe in lived happily ever after. But I believe in lived as best we could, with everything we had. Caleb is sleeping next to him. His head is on my shoulder. He is no longer a hero in my eyes. He is human. A tired, burned out, deeply kind person who just loved me. Not when it was convenient. And then when I broke down. And most importantly, he allowed me to love him back. With all his scars, with changes, with darkness in his eyes. Because love is not about once upon a time, and not about how it was. It's about what's left after everything. I don't know what will happen next. But I do know this. Love and pain are one. And when you accept one, you get another. And only then, you can call it real.